The New York Times is now reporting out of Brussels, the center of the head of the European Union, American tourists who have been fully vaccinated against the coronavirus will be able to visit the EU over the summer. We don't know when that will start, but this is based on the head of the EU in an interview with the New York Times yesterday. It's been more than a year since non-essential travel from most countries has been shut down to Europe. And the EU is saying that because the United States is vaccinating so quickly, and because talks have been advancing about how can we accept vaccination certificates as proof of immunity, the EU and the EU Commission believe that at some point during the summer, now summer is technically, it starts June 21st, they will be able to switch policy to one that would restore the ability of Americans to go to Europe. Ursula von der Leyen, president of the EU, says, quote, "The Americans, as far as I can see, use European Medicines Agency's approved vaccines. This will enable free movement and travel to the European Union because one thing is clear. All 27 member states will accept unconditionally all those who are vaccinated with vaccines approved by the EMA." Adding that the vaccines being used here, Moderna, Pfizer, and J&J are approved and considered valid in the European Union. No current timeline, but this is sort of a top level statement that guidance will be coming soon. And it is looking like we will be at 70% of adults being vaccinated sometime in the month of June. It will all be subject to the epidemiological situation, but that it is improving in the US, and we are starting to see an improvement slightly in the European Union. Now, there are already some European countries where you can go. You can go vaccinated to Estonia. You can go vaccinated to Iceland. You can go to Croatia. There are some other Eastern European countries where you can go, but it's relatively complicated. I have friends that have done it vaccinated, and this seems to be a much broader discussion. The guess is that this will include some kind of reciprocity as well, where presuming that the numbers improve in Europe, the United States will begin to do the same. Now, very important, we are also anticipating new mask guidance tomorrow from Joe Biden via the CDC regarding outdoor masking. Now, Dr. Fauci has been teasing this for some time. A number of different doctors, including Dr. Ashish Jha or Jha and others, have been saying the language they've been using has been relatively restrained, including that it may not be a high point of contagion outdoors. From what we believe, before there was any vaccination, Dr. Ashish says about 1 out of 1,000 cases were being transmitted outdoors. And you have to believe that that 1 out of 1,000 was not someone jogging by someone else. It was people doing things outdoors that are obviously things you shouldn't be doing in the middle of a pandemic before there are any vaccines. But the point is that Dr. Ashish has been making that psychologically, if we can all say, hey, you know what? Outside, if you're not in a big crowd of people, just normal outside, walking by others on the sidewalk, biking by someone, whatever, people aren't getting sick that way. And particularly now, as we approach 30% vaccinated, we can ease up on the outdoor masking. That is the expectation for what the CDC will tell Joe Biden, and Joe Biden will announce tomorrow. Now, it's unclear whether Joe Biden will say, only as it applies to vaccinated people, then you start getting into this two-tiered thing of saying, if you're vaccinated, take your mask off outside. If you're not, don't. I think that there are some potential social issues with doing that. But needless to say, I think that there will be a big psychological benefit and possibly more encouragement for people to get vaccines if indeed the announcement tomorrow is outdoor masking is not required other than in really specific situations. A mass of people at a concert, which there shouldn't be concerts going on anyway, a mass of people maybe entering a stadium where in the stadium with reduced capacity, people are spread out, but you might be funneled through metal detectors, for example, and crowded together, even though it's outside. Okay, wear masks then. But your typical, bike path, whatever. Now, to be clear, I've been doing it all along. I go out on my bike. I go out running. I put a mask on. I do it because I'm a team player. I don't want to be the guy being glared at. And also, there's some degree to which, if you're told to wear a mask outside and you don't, people assume you're probably also not wearing one inside or whatever. So I've been wearing it. But if indeed, when we get that announcement, not really if, it's more a question of when, I am not going to be wearing a mask outside once the CDC says it is not necessary. It is believed that will be tomorrow. And my hope is that will be another boost to people wanting vaccines. The CDC already saying vaccinated people can travel without significant notable risk, material risk. That was a great thing. That made more people say, oh, OK, that's a change. I will go and get vaccinated. And hopefully an update to mask policy tomorrow will do the same. So some signs that are good signs. Some states now are down in terms of daily deaths to close to what you see from flu. Massachusetts is an example of recently about 10 COVID deaths a day. During the average flu season, Massachusetts sees 4 flu deaths a day. So we are getting down to, by virtue of vaccination, a situation where it is going to be a flu-like situation. And that changes circumstances dramatically from when 200 people a day were dying, for example, in Massachusetts. So I believe there are good things coming, but we have to keep vaccinating is the message. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. Timeline, your behavior, your vaccination status. You can find me on Twitter at @Pakman.